So we're recording this a couple of weeks in advance, but when this podcast comes out, it will be 3 days until Christmas. And I wanted to use this as an opportunity to talk about some of our Christmas traditions, because something that you've talked a lot about is making impactful experiences for your kids. And I think that when you have memorable family moments, it helps with the building of the relationships within the family. It's something that you can look back on fondly, look forward to with a lot of anticipation. And growing up, I remember Christmas in Florida just because I remember like opening gifts while sweating, which is kind of a weird thing now that I live in Denver and spent most of my life in Indianapolis. But we probably 10 years ago started this Christmas tradition of having with just our family, no grandparents, nobody else, a candlelit Christmas Eve dinner. We'd go to the Christmas Eve Mass, the children's Mass at whatever, 5 or 6 o'clock at our parish. And then we'd come home, turn off all the lights, just have candles and have a dinner. And the thing that always stood out to me is when you're part of a big family and a big extended family, usually at the holidays, there's like the old people table and then the kids table. And the first time we had a Christmas Eve dinner at just our house, everybody got to sit at the big kids table. And none of us ever forgot it because you've got, the 2-year-old and the teenagers and the adults. So what kind of led to that change? Like what did that progression look like?
Yes. I think it's when you're first married, there's that challenge where we're invited back to be with the in-laws, which we loved. We loved to be with the in-laws, and Maria had siblings who were a little bit older than us and younger than us. And so it was the family, we kind of we were closer to Maria's parents and lived near them. So we got incorporated into a lot of those family traditions, and she was one of the older kids in her family, the second one to be married. So that went on for a number of years where we would spend Christmas. There were some early on some Christmases that we'd spend with my family out in California, but it was expensive to fly all the way out there, especially as more and more kids came. And for a number of years, even after we had kids, then we were trying to figure out our own identity, our own family time. And we realized that wait, well, hold on. We didn't want to do just Christmas over at the grandparents' house, and be there in the morning. We did that a few times when you guys were younger, but then we wanted to have our own family tradition. And so we started to say, we'll go and see you later in the day, but we're going to open up presents and have sleepy kids in pajamas with their blankie, come downstairs and just enjoy all of that together, so that there's a real sense of our own family tradition, but just to enjoy being with each other, and not necessarily do that out in a crowd. So that was probably one of the first things that happened, is that we decided we wanted to spend that time together, and that was great. There's a lot of fun pictures from there, but then we would
and there were some things that organically generated from that, because obviously the much younger kids can't wait for Christmas morning. They're not up late the night before getting gifts out and stuff like that. And so they would get up really early, and the dictate came down: you're not allowed to wake anybody up. You're not allowed to go and wake anybody up. And so what ended up happening is...
At 5 a.m.
I think it was... 5 a.m., yeah. I think it was Gabrielle, Madeline, and Colin who woke up early one year, and they started just singing Christmas carols downstairs. And so the rest of us who were upstairs ended up waking up to the sound of our siblings singing Christmas carols. Very gently. It wasn't this obnoxious thing. But that was a tradition that was kind of naturally born from that decision that, hey, we're all going to, instead of going over to Kiki's and Grandpa's house, we're all going to open our gifts here. And that came from that.
Right. And I would say, and that ended up being really good. And as well as we had one year, actually I had a tough financial year. And so we decided, you know what, we're going to do Christmas differently this year. Like, I don't have money for gifts, or very little for gifts. And so we had figured out, we kind of got excited. Like, we were doing gifts that were things that we made, and we just got really creative, and we were going to do some experiences as opposed to gifts. And right before that, there was some friends of the family who heard what was going on with us, and they handed Maria money, and they said, you can't spend this on bills. You have to spend this on presents for your kids. And so it was Christmas Eve, and Maria and I went over to Cracker Barrel, and Cracker Barrel has fantastic gifts. And so we went into Cracker Barrel, and everything was discounted, like way down, because everybody had already done their Christmas shopping except for us. And so we were like little kids in the candy shop, and we were buying all these really fun gifts. And so whoever their buyer is did a fantastic job. One of those gifts it was a set of angels that would sing Christmas carols in unison, and it was just really cool. One would start, and it had those like monofilament strands in it with lights in it, so that they would have shine different colors of lights. And so that gift, we had when we brought that one home and wrapped it up, that gift became a favorite. And so in future years, the kids would come down, and they would play that during during that early morning singing time. And so we would hear that from above, like I can hear there's the angels singing. So that has continued and really been pretty enjoyable. There's another thing that happened where the kids, because then we had the teens who wanted to stay in bed even later, and they would just pretend like they didn't hear anything. And so we would do like a
guilty as charged.
We would do a Christmas movie for the little kids, and often it was It's a Wonderful Life. Which was so enchanting that I'd come down and I would want to watch it with the younger kids as well. So a lot of those things just came up out of necessity, because we're like, okay, what are we going to do? This is lasting too long. But then on the flip side, it became something that was really good.
And I want to come back to this. Obviously, we could talk about Christmas stories for hours. But I want to come back to this idea of making impactful experiences for your kids, and this idea of being intentional in doing so. Because before we had the Christmas Eve dinner at our home, before we were opening gifts at our home, we were every year going over to Kiki's and Grandpa's for both of those things, and yet they weren't, to me, as memorable. And I think the reason why was because at the point we switched to doing this stuff at home, it felt like you and Mom were trying to create an experience for our family, and that we were worth that. And there was something about going over to Kiki's and Grandpa's that felt like we were going to spend Christmas with them. So in a sense, it was about them. At least to me as a kid, that was my perception. I'm sure there was a lot more going on that I didn't understand. But there was, at the point that we transitioned, it was like, no, like, you're going to sit at the table and we're going to, have a candlelit dinner, and we're going to use the fine china, and you're going to help with the cooking, and then you're going to help with all of this stuff. And we're going to like sing Christmas or have Christmas music in the background. And, it felt like you were creating an experience for us. And to me, that started to put in my mind, put importance on our family that hadn't been there to the same degree.
Yeah, I would agree. It was something that your mom and I started to enjoy as well, and because you guys enjoyed it, we would get more help, so it made it easier to do.
Yeah, I don't want to make it sound like we were forced to help.
Right.
Like it was part of the thing. Like, we were going to make a special dinner with ingredients and food that we would not have any other time. And we got to help with it. We were each in charge of our little thing.
Yes, and one of the fun things was the decorations, because then we would go all out and say, like, okay, can we bring greenery in? Let's get the tablecloth and the red silky like table runner, and just really make it beautiful. And so there was this anticipation that would come together. And when it comes to...
and then like the last couple of years, like Madeline has actually taken charge of designing the napkins. so that like instead of just like, folding them into quarters and putting them on the plates, like she actually went onto Pinterest and found that you could like create Christmas trees out of your napkins. And so we had this like impromptu activity of all of us learning from a YouTube video how to make Christmas trees out of the napkins and who can make the best Christmas tree. And your Christmas tree is falling over and the base is way too small. And like, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's I think that's awesome, and to see her gift come out with that, and then to see everybody else join in, and then we do this other thing where she would get a little like a little bowl and then put candles in it that would float in there, and then mom would buy cranberries and put those, so it's floating cranberries with candles, in the middle of the table along with the other larger candles, and so it's enchanting. And that was there were three aspects that would really make an event, an experience memorable. The first thing, that it needs to be sensational. So like it has to involve your senses. So it's like the Christmas music. So you're hearing something and that sets a mood. There's smells. It's the smell of the burning wax, the smell of the cooking food, the smell of the dessert. And so all of that is just, it's going into your brain and you're remembering it. And then it's just visually that it's, visually beautiful. So there's a way in which all the senses, and everybody's dressed up nicely. And it's usually the night that we do pictures by the tree. And so the lights on, so the Christmas tree's lights on, all those great flickering lights. But there's an importance with all of those senses being, invoked. So that's the first one is sensational. So think about all of those things. How do things taste, look, smell? Sensational. Second one, to make it really impactful, and you're speaking to this, it needs to be relational. So it needs to be something where we're interacting, having fun with each other, and enjoying the music, and telling jokes, and so we were much more family when it was just us focusing in on this event. And so that helps us to remember, and to have the little kids, there's something powerful about pictures, because you would take up with your video experience and be like, I'll take the pictures. Well, then there's this moment where again, you're going to have your picture taken, and the next person's going to have their picture taken. And so everybody's important, and then try to get the picture with all of us in there. And, usually you'd stand behind and try to take a picture without, and you're like, no, come on in. And so it becomes the joke. And then you would come running in at the last minute, and you'd always have the ham and the person, who's making a funny face when we got the serious ones, like, well, that didn't come out. So it ends up being a fun experience, but from a relationship standpoint. And then the last piece is that it needs to be inspirational. And by that, it needs to inspire joy, inspire, again, beauty, inspire goodness, so that when you've experienced it, that you just have this sense of like, this is good. And it pushes you a little bit closer to heaven, because in heaven is the fulfillment of all desire. So it's the fulfillment of all delight. And like, I'm inspired, like I want this for myself, and I want this for others, which is exactly what evangelization is supposed to be all about, is that I am so inspired by the goodness that I'm experiencing. I don't want to keep it to myself. I want to share that with others. And so what's really awesome as a parent and now a grandparent is to see some of those traditions picked up with the other kid, like Gabrielle and Michael are married. And so then they are now decorating, their apartment, and Daniel and Lydia, same thing. They've decorated, and they're trying to create that experience for their kids. And I find myself wanting, I want to be present and see their little kids opening gifts, but I also really want them to be their own family and enjoy that time together.
Yeah, and I think what's beautiful about that is that you're talking about the actual impact that this has had. That building up these different traditions has caused us to have this idea of this is what we want in our own families, this is what we want in our own lives. But quite frankly, also to say, for as long as possible, I want to stick with those traditions with my siblings. I think that the beauty of a big family is that Daniel and Lydia have two kids who are 2, 3, and 1, or under 1. Yeah. And Vivian is still 6, mm-hmm. So there's this, we still have the range of ages. And so for Vivian, she gets to enjoy some of these Christmas activities with her 2 little nephews,
Right.
which is really exciting. But what are some of the kind of the bigger ramifications of this? Creating memorable experiences like this, what are some of the payoffs over time?
Yeah, I think one very practical thing is just a sense of belonging, that I am loved, and I'm a part of something really good. And that's just, it's very practical. I have not been in a situation where I've lost one of my parents. My friends who have said, like Michael, it's just like I've lost this mooring, this pillar in my life that I just always thought was there, and they're not there anymore. Like I can't count on their presence. And so there's a way in which, the identity of like who I am and that I'm loved, and I'm a part of something good that is instilled with these traditions. And there's a comfort that's brought to our children and to us to spend that time together.
One other thing I wanted to touch on with regard to some of our smaller tea traditions around the holidays is that one of the years that finances were a little tighter, instead of going and buying gifts for each of us, you actually ended up getting us a couple of rooms at Clifty Falls State Park. It was a couple hour drive from home, and we had a 3 or 4 day like family getaway. And I remember at the time being really annoyed that I didn't get to have the gifts I wanted from my list, like that you guys didn't even look at the list because we were going to go on a family trip. But now I don't remember almost any of the gifts I got for Christmas. I remember getting Madden one year. I remember getting a portable DVD player one year, but that's about it. I've never forgotten those trips. I've never forgotten the time that we spent together, the areas we explored. I remember going spelunking with you and Daniel. We started going further and further up the tunnel of one of these caves at Clifty Falls, and got to the point where like we were crouching down further and further, and to the point where we had to crawl, and we were like, okay, this is a lot scarier than we thought it was going to be. And I've never forgotten that. And I think that that's another example of like taking these opportunities, and instead of saying like, let's just do what everybody else does and get gifts, like taking those opportunities and saying, how can we turn this into a family experience, and impactful experiences that builds the relationships within the family and builds that kind of like familial bond.
Yeah, I think having, like on a very practical note, having an activity to do together makes being together easier. And that activity, of course, you don't want it to be, sometimes watch a movie together, but so often it takes the focus off of each other when you're watching a movie. And now if you can move from there to where you're talking about the movie, great. But when there are activities, and this happened even with, I think when I went to Madeline's graduation, because we had a focus for the weekend, it allowed for us to enjoy each other's company in between all of the different activities that we were doing. And it was something that Madeline had said to me, like, I want to make sure during a Christmas break that we have planned out activities, just one thing each day. And so there's a real power, and there's real power in having something that is an activity that you can rally behind, and especially if it's something you can get you up and moving, and going to whatever, making napkins, or if you're going to make it a cookie day where we're going to cook together, or we're going to go out and play something in the yard. If it's too cold, we'll play in the basement. And I think with that, you also just have to look at the talents of your kids in the family to say, well, who's a better planner for that? Because there's some kids that are like, oh, I'd love to plan that. And the challenge for us is that Mom and I don't like to plan that kind of stuff. And so so it was great when Gabrielle was in the house to say like, okay, you love planning things, plan something. And she would plan like whatever, a dance party. And it's like, okay, let's decorate this room and we'll put on music and we'll dance. And so I think that, each family needs to look at like, what are the gifts that we have, and start to assign out to kids who really, they can bring their gifts to bear in the family. And when they do that, like you brought to bear your video and your camera, and that brought this this dimension to where like we really enjoyed looking, and we do it now. We look back at the pictures of things that you took, and then you made it into a documentary. And so we did it recently where we looked at the family documentary, and we can look at those Christmas pictures and like, look how little you were, or look how your hair was, and it's a faculty, that memory as a faculty. Christ said, "Do this in remembrance of me." There's a power in remembering what is good because it keeps us grounded to be able to continue to see what is good in the future. So as we're coming into Christmas, know that these are points of community and communion, which is what we're ultimately made for, where when we're coming together, we're actually imitating what the Holy Trinity does within itself. It's a communion of persons and an eternal exchange of love. And it's not easy. There are times when you have people are upset and tired. And so I would say as well to respect that. One of the things that we didn't do when we were younger parents is that we weren't as good as with tuning. Mom was better than I, tuning in to the kids to say, we're going to be a lot better if we go to bed, earlier so that we're awake tomorrow. And then for some of the nights, we're going to do a lot better if we stay up really late tonight and just blow that all together, where we'll watch something together or sing songs together. One more little tradition that we did that it was really enjoyable is that we started to get some Christmas books, and we would read through the different Christmas stories together. And I remember I so enjoyed that. And some of the little kids would fall asleep, but it's like, what happened next? What happened next? So there's a power. So I throw that idea out there because there's a power in, like one of the books we read together was The Christmas Box. Well, what happened in The Christmas Box? There's a power in experiencing a story together. And I still can, I have memories of sitting on the couch together and listening, and this happened in the story, then there was this twist or turn, and there was interaction at points where people were talking about it, but then we're back in, okay, let's stop, let's hear what happens more in the story.
It took us forever to read those books because we stopped every little bit to talk about them.
That's right. So
and part of what stood out to me, though, is it wasn't just about the story. We took turns reading it. There were 3 or 4 kids at the time who were old enough to be able to read aloud effectively. Mm-hmm. Some of them probably could have read aloud and it would not have been enjoyable. But we had both parents and then 3 or 4 kids. And so we kind of go through and take turns. And that was another thing that I remember.
Yeah. So I would say, and one more thing that's just really fun is taking the time to do the Christmas tree. Putting the lights on and just everything that went around. Sometimes we had an artificial tree. Other times we did a live tree. And so I would recommend, now we're going to use artificial tree this year, but then we put we get some Christmas greenery that's my aunt sends out every year, a wreath. And so that smells so good. So it gets that good smell in there. But there's a delight in the tree and gathering around the tree. And often, you guys always want to sleep under the tree, and it got pine needles everywhere. And so my really practical side would be like, oh, don't do that. Don't sleep under. And your mom would be like, hey, this is their time. They're going to have these wonderful memories of waking up in the tree. Don't you? And I'm like, you're right. I did crawl under the tree. And so making sure that there's a balance of allowing the kids to really enjoy the goodness of the pretty lights and then to turn off all the lights in the house except for the Christmas tree lights, and put on some Christmas music and have some hot chocolate with peppermint candy in it. It's just, again, you're getting all those senses in there, and we've got to celebrate because there's that challenge of I don't know when the next time is going to be. Our life, again, we had that, this year with one of the uncles who had passed away, and he was young. And so we don't know what we're going to have next. And so I think God is really challenging us always, especially in the midst of this COVID stuff, but always be present. Enjoy the goodness of what's available right now. And again, I think that's Christmas gives us an wonderful opportunity to do that.
One last thing that I want to touch on, because we surprisingly really haven't yet, is the Catholic aspect, obviously Christmas involves going to Mass. And I think that there were a lot of years where we never did the midnight Mass because it was just way too late for the kids, and so we didn't really have a plan when it came to Mass. It was kind of more like, we'll get up, we'll open gifts, and usually we're done with that around 9, so then everybody go change really quickly and we'll go to the 9:30 Mass. And I think that the decision to change that and say, you know what, we're going to go to the anticipation Mass at this particular time and we're going to kick off our Christmas activities with Mass was a phenomenal decision because it oriented the priorities correctly. Christmas is not about lights and presents. It's about the birth of Christ. That's where it all starts. And we do all these other things to celebrate the birth of Christ. And so the fact that we prep Christmas Eve for that nice dinner, but then we go to that evening Mass and we put Christ first, and then we follow that with this celebration, the prayer that we do before that Christmas Eve dinner is not just the Bless Us, O Lord prayer. It's also a prayer of thanking Christ for his birth and welcoming him into the world. I think putting that priority first was also something that was memorable and helped kind of like set the tone for the rest of the activities.
Yeah, I would. And I actually really love that Mass because it ends up being something that everybody's dressed up for. The church looks beautiful. We've been anticipating the moment where Christ is in the manger. And after that Mass, with our manger, we can put Christ in. So usually the youngest person's like, okay, it's time, I can put him in. So that, and surely having that, the Eucharist is the center of, the church says that, Christ is the reason for, the center of, and the culmination of all of human history. And so having our mangers, and we've got several different manger scenes, around the house, really brings clarity to why we can be so joyful, especially with it being at at least on the Northern Hemisphere, when it's cold and dark, and the shortest day of the year is usually around the 23rd. So that's just the whole meaning of the light. So this Christmas light, the evergreen tree, which is, that's who Christ is always bearing fruit in us. So I think that knowing, for our kids to know that is the center, and quite frankly, it's really hard because Christmas previously used to be, it was a lot like Lent. Advent was a lot like Lent, and it still should be, but the whole world is bursting with the lights. And so, and we've had the challenge this year where we say, okay, we're going to really try to prepare for this like Lent. But instead, so we're trying to do that with little sacrifices that we can do. Yet we're still getting the house ready. We're still putting out the lights. And then the big question is, do we turn on our Christmas lights before Christmas? Last year and the last couple of years, we didn't. We got them all ready. We checked them, and we didn't turn them on until Christmas. And so then at Christmas, we turned them on and we said, yay, we could celebrate with our neighbors like 1 or 2 days, it wasn't long. And many of the neighbors had started right at Thanksgiving. And so like in our neighborhood, there was lights all over, and they go from Thanksgiving to Christmas. And so if there's any nice day after Christmas, the people tend to take them all down. And so we're doing the 12 days of Christmas, and we are keeping ours up. And we felt out of sync. So we're gonna sneak in some Christmas lights at a time. And the younger kids are like, can we just turn them on sometime? So we will be turning some of them on. And so it's hard because, again, we've changed the focus in society, and so we're trying to walk that line where we do enjoy the central part of it with the lights ahead of time, but then also we keep them on for 12 days. I'm not taking them down until we've got 12 days, and I'll often just push all the way in to the presentation. It's like we're gonna, and if it goes in further, we'll go further.
That's all we have time for today. If you like what you've heard on the podcast, please subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and encourage your friends and family to do the same. If you want to support the work of Strong Catholic Dad, you can become a monthly sponsor for as little as $5 a month. I quit my job back in 2018 to found Strong Catholic Dad, and as of right now, it's not enough to pay the bills. So anything that you can do is appreciated. Until next time, be strong in faith, strong in hope, and strong in love. God bless.